Hey, there's Noah with the Creative Startup Podcast, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about Plato's Cave, what it illustrates, and really what it means for you as an artist. So Plato's Cave is basically the scenario that Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher, describes to illustrate enlightenment. So the situation, and I'm not going to read this out of the book because it's a little bit wordy and kind of long, but the situation is that there are three men, and they're all chained up in this cave. And they've been chained there since birth, and their heads are fixed in one position. They can only look at the wall. And then behind them, there's a fire burning, so it projects their shadows up onto the wall. And sometimes, like, a puppeteer will come and project different shapes and shadows up onto the wall for them to see. And as they hear those shadows talk to each other and they see the shadows move, that's their concept of the world. That's their idea of reality. Their reality is all that they can see on this wall. So in their world, it makes sense that shadows talk to each other, that everything's monochrome, that it's just kind of a flickering onto a wall. That's their world. That's all they see. But one day, one of the men manages to free himself from his chains. He kind of busts them off his wrists and decides he's going to get out of this cave. He's had it with the cave. And so he turns around and starts walking up a little bit higher until he gets to the mouth of the cave. And when he gets to the mouth of the cave, it's so bright he can barely see anything. It's just like he's blinded by it. And the sun is his enemy. The sun makes it harder for him to see because he isn't enlightened. He doesn't know what the world is, and his eyes aren't adjusted. But then as a little bit of time passes by, he begins to see the world. At first he just recognized reflections, but then he starts to see things as real whole shapes. Starts to get the big picture of what things really are. Not just shadows, not just reflections, but really things exist separate from him. And this understanding is amazing for him. It's exhilarating. He gets so energized. He said, there's colors and there's things and there's shapes and there's people and 3 dimensions. And so he goes back down into the cave to tell his friends, the 2 other guys who were chained up there with him. But when he goes down into the cave, he can no longer see the shadows on the wall because his eyes are adjusted to the sun. He can now see the real world, but he can't any longer see the fake world. He can't see the shadows on the wall. And so his friends think he's crazy. And in the story, in the allegory that Plato paints for us, his friends actually try to kill him. They try to get rid of him because they think he's just off his rocker. He's lost his mind. He clearly doesn't get it anymore. When in reality, he's the one who saw reality for what it was. What can we learn from this situation? Well, how does that apply to us? Well, the first major thing that I get from it is that we should be interested, we should be intrigued by people who seem different. And there's some people who just seem enlightened. They seem like they have a better understanding of the way the world is, that they see things differently. And instead of writing them off as crazy or as just going against the flow or being rebellious, it's so important for us as artists who want to understand the world better, who want to express things better, to seek to understand the way that they see the world, and the enlightened way that they see it, and learn from them. Learn from how they have come to see things and come to understand things. So important. The second and really, really crucial thing that we have to take away from this is be enlightened ourselves. Now that is a big word, that's a big idea, that's a big concept of just being enlightened, right? Because it means different things for different people. I don't want to get super spiritual or anything here. That's not at all what this is about. It's just about helping you see things a little bit differently. So when I listen to certain music, or when I look at certain art, when I see certain paintings, there's some stuff that's just like a good expression of how things are, and that's good. But then there's things that peer deeper into what things appear to be, right? Like when you listen to Kendrick Lamar's music, he's clearly seeing things in a deeper perspective. He's not just expressing human emotion and feeling, he's expressing a vision that's deeper than what he himself understands. That's incredible to me. And that takes a certain level of thinking, a certain level of understanding that most people never reach. So how do you reach this level of understanding? How do you get to that level? Well, there's no step-for-step way to do this. There's no simple, here's, 3 ways to be enlightened. I will give you guys a little bit of tips, a little bit of advice. I'm not perfectly, enlightened either, but I'm learning to see things differently. And I hope that you guys can learn that too. So, the first thing that's really important to becoming enlightened, to really seeing things differently, is read. Here in The Shortness of Life, one of my favorite books, he talks about this. He talks about why we should read. He says, unless we are most ungrateful to all those men, glorious fashioners of holy thoughts, were born for us. For us they have prepared a way of life. By other men's labors we are led to the sight of things most beautiful that have been wrestled from darkness into light. From no age are we shut out. We have access to all ages. And if it is our wish, by greatness of mind, to pass beyond the narrow limits of human weakness, there is a great stretch of time through which we may roam. And what a great way of putting that. If you want to understand things, if you want ideas that are bigger than anyone's thinking right now, read. Read back. Read stuff that's coming out today. Read stuff that came out thousands of years ago, like this book, the ancient Roman philosophy right here. Read, read, read. And it will expand your mind. It'll get your thinking out of today, the news, the headlines, the hype, the just lies that are always going around. And it sets you a little bit above. It gets your thinking going on a more productive path. It's also super important to learn. I think a lot of people think that like truth just shows itself to you, that like truth just kind of comes your way as you live life. And that might be true. You know, I think older people are oftentimes a lot wiser and smarter than younger people. But you can't wait your whole life just to become wise and then die. Or you can't wait your whole life to become smart and then die. I love here in Republic by Plato where he's explaining the cave. He says after it, but whether it is true or false, my opinion is that the word of knowledge, the idea of good, appears last of all, and is seen only with an effort. And when seen, is also inferred to be the universal author of all things beautiful and right. So, basically what that's saying is knowledge, wisdom, enlightenment, it's not just something that comes to you with time. It's something you have to press for. It's something you have to think for. You have to yearn for. And so that's why I encourage you guys, always be reading, always be learning, always be journaling down stuff. I mean, last week I had like a big issue with one of my friends. I couldn't figure it out. I don't know what was going on. I was kind of just feeling bad, and it was a struggle that was going on. And I kept trying to figure it out just in my head, you know, like what's going on, what's going on, what's going on. And then I sat down and kind of used even a scientific method of like, okay, this is what's happened, this is what happened, this is how I felt. You know, and the same thing has happened with this person, and I felt differently. And this person, and I wrote it all down, exactly what happened. And then I analyzed it, said, okay. And I had to quickly extrapolate why I was feeling the way I was feeling, what caused it. Was it my issue? Was it their issue? What was it? And when I finally got to the bottom of that, I was easy to assess the problem, fix the problem, and move on with my friendship. And we have to be able to do that in life. That's a big part of being enlightened, being on this another level, is taking these conflicts that we have every day, taking these problems we have every day, writing them down, journaling them down, jotting them down, and comparing them with other situations that we know from our life or from other people's lives or stories that we've read, and trying to extrapolate the meaning, trying to figure out what's the core of this. What is the one problem? What is the one key question we have to be asking ourselves if we really want to get better? If you can do this, I promise you, your issues will only last a short time. You'll be able to move past them, and there'll be bigger issues, and those might require more attention. But it's good to confront these things. It's good to face these things. It's good to learn from the past and take these experiences to make us think on a higher level, to make us consider things on a higher level instead of being caught up in the day-to-day. Again, there's Noah Hovland with the Creative Startup. I hope this is helpful for you. If it is, subscribe. You can buy both Plato's Republic and On the Shortness of Life in links below. Hope you guys enjoy. Thanks.